consumes about 89 million barrels of oil a day, and one barrel of oil is about equivalent to 10,000 man-hours of labor. Okay, so 160 liters of oil is about 10,000 man-hours of labor, which works out to fractions of a cent. So that's how we can all run, these massive, massive farms. They can keep getting bigger because we're basically running energy slaves. And Richard Reinberg did an analysis basically looking at how much energy one human has access to, starting from like the Egyptians, who might have had 1 or 2 donkeys. If you were middle class, you might have 2 donkeys at your disposal. Now we've got armies of, I drive a Honda Accord, and I was trying to justify why I should buy a Honda Accord instead of a minivan. It's like, when has one person ever had 150 horses at their disposal with the turn of a key? So I'm way richer than the average Egyptian. The good news is that we've got tons of fat to trim. We look around all the time, and I'm not going to go into too many examples, but when I really analyze the kind of waste that goes on in our society, there's plenty of oil to go around. We can just start justifying or running our decisions with regards to how we burn fossil fuel through a lens that makes a little bit more sense than what we're doing right now. So next one, please. I think peak soil actually eclipses peak oil, and this was not something that I was aware of as an engineer when I was in the oil and gas industry. But in 2009, the world lost about 89 billion tons of it, which is about 10 to 40 times the rate of replacement on the planet. And it's about the equivalent to losing the state of Indiana per year globally, from a soil perspective. So we can't keep doing this. And I think that we need to take this into account with regards to the lens, with regards to how we grow food for the future. And I believe it was Fred that was just talking about the concept of externalities. I grew up in a cheesecake factory, and if you own a cheesecake factory, one of the things that you need to make cheesecakes is a production line to produce cheesecakes. Well, the average entrepreneur who owns a manufacturing facility can't afford to externalize the equipment that makes his products, and that's how we're actually viewing ecologies right now. Ecologies provide ecological services. They're the cheesecake line, if you will, and we externalize ecologies to try and increase food production to the detriment of future generations. So we can no longer externalize the cost of soil. We can't mine soil anymore in order to produce more humans. Peak phosphorus. Fred also hit on this as well. People are basically saying between 10 and 20 years left of this element. And my take on that is, well, there's basically 2 sides to this story. Our soils actually have more than enough phosphorus for us to keep producing food, but they don't have enough phosphorus for us to keep producing food in the way that we're currently doing it. And the kind of engineer side of me always kind of gets really riled up about this issue, because we all defecate into drinking water. So we hire farmers to grow our food, and then we buy that food. And for those of us that live in cities are kind of like giant vacuums. They suck all the good stuff out of rural areas, and then they send all the bad stuff away. And phosphorus is one of those things that we kind of just flush down the toilet. And even though phosphorus is not like oil in the sense that we can actually recycle it. It doesn't, so it is finite, but it can be recycled. Most of it's ending up in the ocean, creating dead zones. And so, and I should just mention, I meant to say this at the beginning, when I refer to agriculture, I'm not here to bash farmers. I'm referring to agrarian culture, which means that I'm actually talking about everybody within our culture that depends on this system. And so I think it's really, really important. I see, and I'll explain my role within this system towards the end of this presentation, but this is not, I'm here to bash farmers or anything like that. This is a cultural problem that we all have to be talking about, eaters and growers simultaneously. Next slide, please. then in addition to that, 52% of Alberta farmers have off-farm jobs in order to pay for their expensive hobby. So it's pretty serious problems there. Next slide, please. Peak water. I don't need to talk about this too much. 97% of the Earth's water is oceans and 3% is fresh. And I had no idea. I can't remember if it was 70 or 80% used for agricultural production. And I think that we can dramatically change that, but I don't think it's going to come through efficiency. From engineering, engineers talk a lot about this importance of efficiency. We need to change the vernacular. We need to change the dialogue. It can't just be efficiency, it has to be effectiveness. Efficiency and effectiveness have to go together. And I think we can really look to ecologies to understand how those two words interplay together. Next slide, please. So, I could go on and on about peak everything. And there's actually a book called Peak Everything, and you guys probably don't need to read it. I'm kind of preaching to the choir here a little bit, but I think that it's important to understand these concepts when we start talking about what redesigning these systems is going to look like for future generations. And I would say that one of the things that I talked about at the beginning there with regards to what permaculture is the design science based in ethics. And one of those ethics is 7 generations thinking. So how are the decisions that we make today going to impact 7 generations down the road? Knowing that we probably won't get there in our generation, but we need to at least set the course. And so what kind of legacy are we leaving for our children by utilizing all these resources? And one of the things that makes me most sad about all of these peak things is that I don't know if my child's going to actually be able to fly to France or somewhere on the planet when he gets older. Having access to fossil fuel is actually a really fantastic resource. There's some amazing things that we can do with that resource. And we've kind of just pissed it all away in the last 100 years. It doesn't have to be that. The last half of that resource, we can change our relationship to it and understand that it is a very valuable resource and that it can play a role in the future. But what role is it going to actually play? And we can say that about all of our resources as well. How do we steward them as opposed to just utilize them like they're going out of style? So I want to ask a question. Are we in a problem? Do all of these things pose a problem to agriculture, or are they a predicament? And what's the difference between the two? A problem has a solution. A predicament has an outcome. This was something that was proposed by Chris Martinson, who has an online talk, a 3-hour talk called The Crash Course. It's a fantastic introduction to everything you need to know about energy, the economy, and the environment. And I really love how he framed this. The guy in the talk has a problem. Hopefully his hand continues to hold on. And if it doesn't, he's got a rope tied to the rock, so hopefully that little cam lock into the rock continues to hold on as well. But the guy in the bottom there jumping off the cliff has got a bit of a predicament, doesn't he? If he doesn't actually, it looks like he's consciously making that silly decision to jump off of that thing. But if he decides in midair that he doesn't actually want to be going off that cliff, it doesn't matter how hard he flaps his arms, he's going in the water. And hopefully the water is deep enough to be able to pushing this fall. So, is sustainable agriculture an oxymoron? Is that possible? And if it is possible, what does that mean? And what kind of lens do we have to look at in order to be able to define what sustainable agriculture is? Next slide, please. This is kind of how I view our current agricultural system. It's a bit of a house of cards. And Joel Arthur Baker's book, Paradigms, popularized the word paradigm. One of its principles is that every paradigm at its apparent point of perfection is on the verge of collapse. Many think our culture is approaching the zenith of food production through genetic modification, chemical fertilization, and factory farming, when these things are actually the beginning of the collapse. And I remember my parents just actually went